message to leave myself here. The whole of time and space, every single atom of your existence, and I divide them. Everything must come to dust. How can I let go of it? I bring life.
Not only does God play dice, but sometimes throws them where they cannot be seen. Stephen Hawking. Hello, and welcome to the Ancient Wisdom Modern Mind podcast. And today, I would like to share with you the idea of infinite duality. So, in the concept of infinite duality, I will bring together 5 different concepts as evidence for why humanity is bound by dualistic awareness. And these are the 5 elements theory of ancient philosophy, the philosophy of dualism, the 5 Platonic solids of geometry, the Penrose Pattern of mathematics, and the light-wave particle duality of probability in quantum mechanics. So first, I will give a short explanation of the 5 different concepts. 5 elements theory of ancient philosophy. The 5 elements theory is an ancient philosophy used to describe interactions and relationships between things. The 5 elements are wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. And these 5 elements were believed to be the fundamental elements of everything in the universe between which interactions occur. Philosophy of dualism. The philosophy of dualism believes that everything has 2 parts, and each has opposite meanings, like the duality of good and evil. If there are 2 sides to a coin, metaphorically speaking, there's a duality: peace and war, love and hate, up and down, and black and white are dualities. This is also Newton's 3rd law of motion. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Newton's 3rd law of motion is the law of cause and effect, so that every action creates another reaction, which produces a new counter-reaction. Thus, an endless chain of actions and reactions is created. Even the idea of karma is an expression of this law of motion, or dualistic philosophy. 5 Platonic solids. What the idea of the 5 Platonic solids means is that any geometric solids whose faces are all identical, like regular polygons, meaning a 3-dimensional shape, meeting at the same 3-dimensional angles, also known as the 5 regular polyhedra. These are the tetrahedron, or pyramid, which has 4 faces, cube 6 faces, octahedron 8 faces, dodecahedron 12 faces, and icosahedron 20 faces. Now this is nothing new, as the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, 360 BC, theorized that the classical elements of the world were made of these regular solids, and theorized that the 5 Platonic solids represented the 5 basic elements: wood, or air, fire, earth, metal, or universe, and water. The octahedron is associated with wood, sometimes interpreted as tree, or air, and is the growing of matter, or matter's growth stage. The tetrahedron is associated with fire, and is the affluence of matter, or matter's property stage, or expansion stage. The cube is associated with the earth, and is a balance of both yin and yang. The positive and negative stabilized. Its motion is inward, centering and meditative. The dodecahedron is associated with metal, also interpreted as universe, and is associated with the decline of matter, or matter's deterioration. And the icosahedron is associated with water, and this is the low point of matter, or matter's dying or final stage. Note, I have followed the Chinese meaning of the elements rather than what passes as Plato's interpretations, since Plato's denotations do seem to be corrupted with a lot of modern emotional overtones. Next is the Penrose Pattern, also called the Penrose tiling. In 1974, Roger Penrose, a British mathematician, created a revolutionary set of tiles that could be used to cover an infinite plane in a pattern that never repeats. Called aperiodic tiling, which is a set of tiles that can cover an infinite plane with neither gap nor overlap, without the tiling pattern ever repeating itself. The Penrose pattern uses only two patterns infinitely: a thick rhombus and a thin rhombus, which can be tiled in a non-periodic pattern all the way out to infinity without ever repeating. This means that there are an unaccountably infinite number of different patterns that extend out to infinity, and every pattern occurs in an infinite number of ways. And it's impossible to tell that unless you can see the whole pattern, which is impossible. At the heart of Roger Penrose's breakthroughs is forbidden symmetry, so called because it flies in the face of a deeply ingrained association between symmetry and repetition. Symmetry is based on axis of reflection. Whatever appears on one side of a line is duplicated on the other. In mathematics, that relationship is reflected in tiling patterns. Symmetrical shapes such as rectangles and triangles can cover a plane with neither gap nor overlap, and in an ever-repeating pattern. Repeated patterns are called periodic and are said to have translational symmetry. If you move a pattern from place to place, it looks the same. But there is a kind of paradox to the Penrose pattern. There is this uncountable infinity of different versions, but just by looking at them, you could never tell them apart. However, despite their lack of translational symmetry, Penrose tilings may have both reflection symmetry and fivefold rotational symmetry. For example, the five-axis symmetry of the pentagon creates a plane of non-repeating patterns, and even though Penrose's tiles are generated from the lines and angles of pentagons, Penrose's shapes left no awkward gaps. They snug together perfectly, twisting and turning across the plane, always coming close to repetition, but never quite getting there. The Penrose pattern is important in the context of duality because it shows that no matter how much information you have, how much you've seen in this reality, you'll never be able to predict what happens next. It will always be something that you've never seen before. Light wave-particle duality of probability. Wave-particle duality is a concept in quantum mechanics that says every particle or quantum entity may be described as either a particle or a wave. It expresses the inability of the classical concepts particle or wave to fully describe the behavior of quantum scale objects. As Albert Einstein wrote, "It seems as though we must use sometimes the one theory and sometimes the other, while at times we may use either. We are faced with a new kind of difficulty. We have two contradictory pictures of reality, and separately, neither of them fully explains the phenomena of light, but together they do." Now, to understand this, we need to go back to the five elements theory of ancient philosophy, which was used to describe the interactions and relationships of elemental processes. The five elements, wood, fire, earth, metal, and water, were understood to be the fundamental elements of everything in the universe from which all movement and the rhythm or interactions of life occurred. But this five elements idea, as you will see, was corrupted and came to mean the 5 common elements such as wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. But thanks in part to modern quantum mechanics, we have stumbled again upon this lost knowledge, which now sheds some light on the many paradoxes within our often three-dimensional perspective. And by understanding the quasi-periodicity of light particles versus waves, we can at least see at the quantum level how the 5 elements idea interacts in a wave particle of probability, but that this wave of probability is restricted by the 5 Platonic solids. Quasi-periodicity means a behavior that has a pattern of recurrence with a component of unpredictability that does not lend itself to precise measurement. These 5 Platonic solids expand infinity in a partly chaotic and partly orderly pattern of recurrence with a component of unpredictability that does not lend itself to precise measurement. This is a difficult idea to grasp because of our ingrained bias associated with symmetry and repetition. But thanks to Roger Penrose, this pattern can be better understood at the physical level in the Penrose Pattern. And by combining the Penrose Pattern and the 5 Platonic solids with the quasi-periodicity of wave-particle probability in quantum mechanics, we have a clearer picture of how reality is bound by duality. This also implies that the proposition of the 5 elements and what the ancients referred to as the 5 elements from which all interactions of life occurred are the same as the 5 Platonic solids. So it seems that Plato's ideas rises to the fore of modern mathematics, since he was the first recorded philosopher to come to this same conclusion. What this implies through the 5 different principles that come together in this conjecture is that this is also the reason why we cannot manifest our own reality, and this also puts a dent in the popular law of attraction idea, as it shows how this idea is grossly exaggerated, and as much as we want to have control over our personal reality, this conjecture implies that we are trapped in this dualistic reality due to the 5 elements, which means that our thoughts cannot change the world to any great extent. And if you will bear with me, I would like to take you on a quick walkthrough of how this law of attraction idea became so entangled in both Christianity and the New Age movement. The law of attraction grew out of the teachings of Phineas Quimby in the early 19th century. Quimby was diagnosed with tuberculosis and with no reliable cure for tuberculosis at the time. Quimby took to horse riding and noted that intense excitement temporarily relieved him from his affliction. This prompted Phineas to pursue the study of mind over body. Quimby claimed that the trouble was in the mind, for the body is only the house for the mind to dwell in, and we put a value on it according to its worth. Therefore, if your mind has been deceived by some invisible enemy into a belief of illness, then you would manifest that illness. This idea quickly attracted the attention of Christians and occultists alike, who either wanted to find proof for miracles or proof of a supernatural influence, and as this idea is also linked with the ideas of the Russian occultist Helena Blavatsky, who first used the term law of attraction, which appeared in print for the first time in 1877 in a book written by Helena Blavatsky. In the 20th century, we again saw a surge of interest in the subject, with many books being written about it, amongst which are 2 of the best-selling books of all time: Think and Grow Rich, 1937, by Napoleon Hill, and The Power of Positive Thinking, 1952, by Norman Vincent Peale, and You Can Heal Your Life, 1984, by Louise Hay. In 2006, the concept of the law of attraction gained renewed exposure with the release of the film The Secret, which was then developed into a book of the same title in 2007. The movie and the book gained widespread media coverage. This was followed by a sequel, The Power, in 2010, that talks about the law of attraction being the law of love. If you did stick with me and have not turned me off in disgust, I would also like to show how lightwave particle probability does offer us a small thread of truth to the idea that consciousness can influence our world. Because the lightwave particle duality of probability idea does allow us to influence the world at the quantum level, the law of attraction claims that if you are thinking, visualizing, and making big inspired actions towards your desired goal, you will influence your reality. But the key word is actions. And without action, thinking and visualizing will not lead to a manifestation of your desires. Now, I also know that some believe that the lightwave particle idea is evidence of the law of attraction, and that thoughts change reality. But what is missed in this idea is that the wave particle nature of reality is more a reflection of duality, and that what the light wave particle idea actually reflects is the positive and negative aspects of duality. In a nutshell, what this basically means is that if you focus on the negative, then that's what you will see. And if you focus on the positive, then that's what you see. And that it is through our actions that we are actually creating our own growth or decline. So what this means is that fundamentally we are trapped in a dualistic dimension, and it does not matter what the consciousness believes or what ideology we hold. We cannot escape this dualistic reality through thinking or belief. Dualism is a consequence of our preference awareness, which is in itself a construct of being self-aware of one's surround, and that this self-awareness is affected by the 5 Platonic solids, which influences duality in infinite ways. But because of our bias towards symmetry and repetition, this gives us the impression that we have or can escape this dualistic dimensional monopoly. Dualistic awareness, or as I prefer to call, preference awareness, is a state of being aware of and responsive to one's surroundings. Consciousness constructs mental representations and abstract objects or abilities that make up the fundamental building blocks of a hierarchical awareness. Examples of this dualistic state are science from the perspective of classical physics, the evolution hypothesis, and polytheistic religions are all a consequence of preference awareness. Dualism and the idea of karma is a construct of being self-aware of one's surround and the experience of cause and effect. Newton's third law of motion is an example of dualistic preference awareness, and so is nihilism, existentialism, absurdism, and minimalism versus consumerism. These are all variants of dualistic thinking or preference awareness. Dualism is a perceptual dimension, meaning that we perceive in a one-directional movement. For example, we cannot move freely in time, but are forced to subjectively move in one direction. And this is also how duality binds us to this dimension. Because of preference awareness, it is not possible to ignore the dualistic nature of reality, as awareness of patterns gives order to our lives and the world around us, giving us meaning and purpose. But this dualistic awareness also consumes us by compelling us and driving us to obsession. And this obsessive preference awareness then forces us to make elaborate databases with an inventory of all the patterns that the mind has a preference for. But the fact that there are a multitude of preferences also shows that we can choose whether to accept our preferences or to discard them. If we accept our preferences, then we will take them to their logical conclusions. And this then becomes our core reality, our specialty, our ideology, our religion. Ironically, preference awareness is ultimately an illusion, a subjective choice. What this means is that although we function within a matrix of subjective patterns, we can reject a pattern if we choose because of its subjective nature. And this is probably also the most common error made in the understanding of what is reality, since most simply assume that the idea of reality is objective in the context of being physical and having a cause and effect on our lives. For example, in the context that gravity is a universal law, basic science is right. What goes up must come down. This is the dualist's understanding of reality. For the dualistic perception is from the perspective of separation. The mind and physical reality are distinct and separable. Yet mind and reality is a paradox, a contradiction where reality is objective and bound by immutable laws. But it is also subjectively altered by the mind's perception of reality. This is the paradox, two perceptions existing simultaneously. Now, I am not saying that we should reject our preferences or that patterns do not exist. But what I am saying is that preferences are all-consuming to the point that they affect how the mind perceives reality. The mind is compelled to see only the patterns that it has a preference for, and it is this excluding of unrelated patterns that creates and forcibly applies a subjective preference on the mind. You can choose this pattern, or this pattern, or this pattern, but you must choose. And this is the important differentiation that concept construction teaches us. The art is not to reject our pattern preference, or to be unattached from things, or even to reject our objective world, but to see that things are simply patterns which we apply subjectively to an objective matrix. And this unnoticed influence happens because of pattern recognition, which then absorbs the self within a web of relevant but often trivial complexity. Preference awareness is overcome by concept construction, and this is the state where the mind's comprehension of the unity of reality. Mind fathoms that reality is as one interconnectedness, or more simply expressed as a reasoned interconnectedness between the subjective and the objective. Concept construction has its roots in a monotheistic idea of reality. This monotheistic view focuses on the philosophical idea that there is one God, or one interconnected, multidimensional reality, a singular divine which manifests itself in many ways, including as the Christian Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, but equally so are concepts such as mindfulness. Philosophy is also an outgrowth of this monotheistic view of reality, which uses reason to form concepts, engage in problem solving, and then form reasonable hypotheses. And likewise, so is quantum field theory, a development of concept construction. The act of mindfulness is a final development of the monotheistic view and concept construction, since mindfulness is the psychological process of bringing one's attention to experiences occurring in the present moment. This has the effect of stepping the mind outside of its natural preferences and into a moment-by-moment awareness of the subjective nature of reality. If you're interested in taking your understanding beyond duality and the idea of concept construction, then I also have a post that explores the idea of a ninth dimensional reality called Time Perception and the Ninth Dimension. Just follow the link in the description. Plus, preference awareness is also expanded on in the posts The Human Agreement and the Rational Side of Awareness. And if you like the podcast, I would like to also take a moment to remind you to subscribe to this channel or sign up to the newsletter if you would like to be notified when I release new content. So go ahead and click on the subscribe button, and if you would like to support my work, then you can download the podcast for a small supporter's remuneration. Links are in the description. And if what I talk about resonates with you, and you would like to take your spiritual journey deeper, learn about meditation, or go even deeper with your meditation journey, then I also offer books, meditation audios, and instructional podcasts that cover a variety of meditation and metaphysical topics available at www.jasoncain.net. And it would be my privilege to have you join me over at the Ancient Wisdom Modern Mind website. Here's to you and your fulfillment and growth into every tomorrow to come. This podcast was created by Jason Cain, text copyright by Jason Cain, and production copyright by Jason Cain. All rights reserved.